With us, let's move to this conversation now. You saw just a short while ago ANC member Tony Ngeni in conversation with my colleague Mzansi talking about a lot of things, especially when it comes to land dispossession and how the governing party appears to not be, speaking in one voice when it comes to the implementation of some of these resolutions, even going as far as saying that it's time for this current crop of leadership to make way for a new leadership that is going to be bringing transformation. At the same time, this conversation is happening around the swelling debate when it comes to Minister Lindiwe Sisulu's article that she wrote, and really getting some criticism as well as some praise in other sectors. Let's talk about these developments and more now with Professor Lesiba Teffo. He is a political analyst. Professor Teffo, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I'll begin with the interview, which I know you were listening to as well. One of the things that is quite clear is that, according to Mr. Ngeni, in its current form, this is not the ANC that is going to take the country forward.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. It was very rich coming from him. And I hope many would agree with him that, yes, indeed, it is no longer the ANC that can take this country forward. At least a new mix of political actors must come into the space. I'm glad that he said that much. And I hope they are listening, they are taking note. That's the first point. But I'm equally interested in the first point that he raised, the land question. You know, members of the ANC talk like they are not in charge or they are not in government or in parliament. Section 25 of the Constitution empowers anybody who wants to expropriate land without compensation. And for 27 or odd years, they did nothing about it until the EFF applied pressure and suggested otherwise. Then they woke up from their slumber. What I'm saying was equally said by former President Motlanthe, that if we wanted to, we could have done, because there is an enabling section in the Constitution.
I wonder, Prof, if it's not, linked with what he just said as the reason behind them stalling when it comes to implementing their resolutions, especially around the issue of land dispossession. He says, and I quote, "It's do or die. We can't continue like this, where we are fighting amongst ourselves and neglecting the people." From what you're talking about and what I heard from him, the fighting, and that sometimes some of them continue to say, no, it's a difference of opinion. When you've got different ideologies, opinions, you may clash from time to time. But it sounds like this fighting has gone on for so long and so deep that it has now even impacted on them implementing the very things that they always agree upon when they go to conference.
They take decisions they don't implement. I mean, they can read much better than I can do. Why should they still be debating the expropriation of land without compensation? Their focus was on something else other than what mattered most. I am not inclined towards entering into the space that want to suggest that it is now imminent, it is do or die. People are much wiser today than they were yesteryear. They can no longer be fooled by archaic and anachronistic rhetoric. It cannot be the ANC that tells us that it is urgent, at least to transform and to make land accessible to the people. The people want the land, no doubt about that. But they must take responsibility for not having acted, but focusing on wrong things. If you like, on tenders. If you like, on access to power and access to resources. At the heart of it, they are fighting for power in order to access state resources or the national granary. And they will use all platitudes in order to get there. People are much wiser today than they were 27 years ago.
Prof, I'm not sure if you'll agree with me that this is confusing somewhat, and I'm moving on to this point of some of those that need to step aside. He says the generation of President Cyril Ramaphosa cannot lead the next phase of economic transformation. And he also then in the same breath says that when Mzansi asks that should Minister Sisulu be approached to stand for the leadership of the ANC, should she accept that? And he says no, he wouldn't mind if she were to stand as a leader of the ANC. Does she not come from the same generation that he says needs to step aside? Because he also argues a generational mix, but even those that are backing the current president would argue a generation of mix. So I'm a bit confused there as to shouldn't this be the generation that he says should step aside, really?
I'm as confused as you are. However, I'm sure you are much smarter than that, right? He is talking about a generational mix, which I am in favor of. But equally, you would want to say, to the extent possible, let's persuade the president not to go for the second term because he's aged. However, same should not apply to Lindiwe Sisulu. Either of them, whoever wants to get into the space, including Ace Magashule, let them give each other a chance and let the best man or the best woman win. But if there is a policy decision they take, let them at least canvass on the strength of logic, persuasive, rational discourse. Let the right person be elected. But Edward, I think he was just trying to be smart, because he even prefaced his input by saying, "I am not available because I think I have gone beyond the hill and I've served as best as I could. Maybe a new generation should come." So I think he was smart to say that as a preface to the main statement.
So, Prof, one of the things that we've seen in the public domain is that, what they touched upon, which was the article that was written by the tourism minister. And one of the things that he says that where does Zondo take the mandate from stopping people from speaking their minds? He has overstepped his market's judicial overreach. A number of people have also come out to say that the acting Chief Justice should not have held that media briefing yesterday. In fact, he should have found a way of expressing his views on what was written in that article pertaining to the judiciary. Was it a wise move for him to hold this briefing yesterday?
I think it was. I have no doubt about that. And before I even go to that one, I think let's use the appropriate terminology sometimes. And if we are less qualified, let's at least refrain from those. Judicial overreach cannot be said what transpired yesterday. It is a different term for a different context. But I think in political terms, he's just trying to tell us that he should not have done that. And I'm saying, you had the president moved into the space quickly and pronounced, I would say the Chief Justice was wrong. But you cannot allow them to continuously behave like sacrificial lamb. Remember, he has the authority to defend, to protect his colleagues to the extent possible. The law allows him to do that, right? He's the number one judge. He's the one, when his peers, his colleagues, including a principal of primary school, if needs be, he will stand up to protect his teachers, to protect his children. But in the circumstances, I think you may say it's a bit dicey, it's a bit delicate, but I think he did the right thing. For far too long, the judges have been hammered. And we know they are trying to delegitimize them and then send as the fear of the Lord in them when they are to make their own judgments. And who are those?
So, Prof,
why should you fear if you are not innocent? It is those who have the potential to appear before them with the likelihood of conviction that they are trying to legitimize our judiciary.
Prof, very briefly, what makes this moment different? Because last year we saw Helen Zille coming out calling the Constitutional Court, one can even use the term an ANC poodle, and this was, that judgment around the electoral process. There's been several moments where we saw the judiciary come under fire. What made this moment, the one that is to warrant such a response from the highest court in the land, you would say?
I think it is the language used. Some people in the past were a bit subtle, including Zille. And judges must also not fool themselves. Theirs is a contested space. They will continuously be put under pressure. But I think they have acquitted themselves well, even at the worst of time. You would recall 10 years ago or 5 years ago. But I think the current moment, I think the tenor, Lindiwe Sisulu has the right to express her view, including to criticize the judges, by the way. If and when it is factual, she can substantiate. And I think Justice Zondo said as much, that we are no angels. And if there is constructive criticism, by all means, we'll gladly embrace that and work and consider it. So it's not like he was foreclosing everything and saying we are deities, therefore we cannot be criticized. No, that's not the spirit in which we're speaking.
Prof, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time. That was Professor Lesiba Teffo. He's a political analyst, and this is coming at the back of that conversation that my colleague Mzansi Lembetshe had with an ANC NEC member, Tony Yengeni, who was talking about really a wide-ranging issues. And you look at the issue of land dispossession, he really hits very hard at the ANC, the party in which he's, a member of the NEC, and he says that they have not done enough to implement the resolutions that they were supposed to. And he says that it is time then for the current crop of leadership under the current president to then make their way out and for the next generation to take South Africa into economic transformation, and also talking about a generational mix. This is, of course, a story that continues in the public domain.